Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today on the program, we talk to Alabama State House candidate Marilyn Lands about her bid for office. We are also going to be breaking down Alabama's system of taxation and how it benefits the wealthy and hurts the poor. We're obviously going to be taking a look at what workers and bosses were up to last week in the South. All that and more on today's program. I also want to send a special hello and welcome to our newest listeners in Whitesburg, Kentucky. That's right. This week, our show will debut on WMMT 88.7 FM in Whitesburg, Kentucky. So 4 radio stations in 3 states. We are, I think, can we now be called a nationally syndicated radio program? We're getting there if we're not. So anyway, if you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. We're going to open those phone lines up. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might play it on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online. In particular, on our website, you can subscribe to our newsletters, TVLR.fm. Our newsletters that come out every single week are Last Week in Southern Labor, where we take a look at what working folks in the South were up to in the last week, and Boss Watch, where we take a look at what bosses were up to in the last week. And here's a spoiler warning. We think that the former is good, workers, and the latter is bad, the bosses. So just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. TVLR.fm/donate is where you can make a one-time or recurring contribution. You can also buy our merch at TVLR.fm/store. We have an excellent t-shirt, and you can become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report if you are more familiar with that ecosystem. If you're a member of a union, then please think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that. We absolutely could not do this program without the support of organized labor paying for us to be on the radio on 4 stations in 3 states, paying for the labor that it requires to make the show. Adam and I are volunteers, but everybody else on the program we pay, and we pay now at a new minimum wage of $21 $10 an hour. We raised that in the new year. So we're really proud of trying to do everything that we can to make the part-time work that everybody is putting in valuable and worth their time, while still recognizing, of course, that this is, we're operating on a shoestring budget, and but we do what we can, and really proud of the record that we have so far, and like I said, would not be possible without both our monthly individual donors and especially the support of the labor movement.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're interested in running advertising on our program, please let us know. We'd be happy to work with you. But let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, now WMMT, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. As most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a couple of diehard union brothers who believe that Alabama and the South's labor movement and working class deserve a bigger platform. So we're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we could not do it without you. We want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or first-time listener. We really appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you for everybody tuning in right now. We've already got almost 20 people watching, but only 9 people have liked the stream. Let's get those numbers up before the next break. And on YouTube and Facebook is where we stream every single week. We are live on Saturdays for the folks who are listening to us on WMMT. So if you want to interact with us live, you can find us Saturday mornings, 9:30 a.m. Central Time, Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report. Let's jump into our first segment this week. Last week in Southern Labor, we take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to. Here's what they were up to from February 9th to the 16th. In new campaigns, 2 workers at Consolidated Nuclear Security in Amarillo, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Metal Trades Council of Amarillo, Local 306. They are affiliated with OPEIU and IAM. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, as the union representing 6 workers at Everon, a security company in Knoxville, Tennessee. 52 workers at SP Plus Corporation in St. Rose, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 1535. The employer filed a petition to hold a union election after a majority of the 16 workers at Starbucks in Miami, Florida, demonstrated support for unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 130 workers at Transdev Services in Arlington, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with ATU Local 689. 3 workers at Valero Refining Company in Memphis, Tennessee, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 80 workers at Cargill in Reserve, Louisiana, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 270. 95 workers at Tensar Corporation, an infrastructure company in Morrow, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. In election results, 3 petitions were withdrawn last week. One was a raid on the National Association of Special Police and Security Officers bargaining unit at Allied Security in Washington, D.C. by the Protective Service Officers United. A petition to hold a union election with the IBEW Local 2 among the 9 workers at Como Electric Cooperative in Tipton, Missouri, and a petition to hold a union election with the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees, IATSE, among the 12 workers at Hairspray on Tour in Fort Myers, Florida. In a pretty quick turnaround, 7 workers at Wells Fargo in Virginia Beach, Virginia, who filed a petition to hold a union election on January the 16th, voted on February the 8th unanimously in favor of unionization with Wells Fargo Workers United, a CWA affiliate, with the results being certified on February the 16th. So only a month between filing and election result certification. That's a timeline you did not used to see, but is the result of General Counsel Abruzzo's changes to board policy with respect to elections. So very good news, and we're seeing more and more short election timelines like that, making it easier for workers to organize. 16 workers at Starbucks in New Orleans, Louisiana, voted 12-4 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United. 17 workers at HCI Integrated Solutions in Fort Bliss, Texas, voted 14-3 in favor of unionization with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE Local 351. We told you a while back that the petition to hold a union election at the Texas Tribune with the News Guild CWA was withdrawn. That is because the workers at the Texas Tribune announced last week they received voluntary recognition. So very excited to hear that. In strikes and bargaining updates, 420 members of Teamsters Local 997 began a strike this morning at Molson Coors on Saturday, citing the company's refusal to present a fair offer, so far making an offer of only less than $1 an hour raise. Negotiations opened between the Communication Workers of America, CWA, and Altus USA, a telecommunications company, on a new contract. The current 4-year contract, covering workers from Beckley to Logan, West Virginia, is set to expire on April 25th. Alaska Air flight attendants voted to authorize a strike in an absolutely wild number. About 84% participated in the vote.
No, 94%.
Yeah, 94% participated in the vote, with 99.48 voting in favor of a strike authorization. So that sends a very powerful message to Alaska Airlines. After unionizing with UFCW Local 400, farmers market workers in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland who work for Fresh Farm have a contract that includes a $20 an hour minimum wage, a premium for speaking a second language, and vacation time for seasonal employees for the first time ever. U.S. Senator for Alabama Tommy Tuberville derided the idea of college football unionization, saying that college sports is, quote, about learning experiences, not about making money, unquote. Meanwhile, after accepting $5 million in public money from Alabama to quit his former job as Auburn head coach, he still collects a pension from Auburn that is higher than the median salary in the state of Alabama. Ford CEO, vampire, lizard person, etc., Jim Farley, had hinted last week at the threat of outsourcing work after the UAW strike, making it all the more important and impactful that the UAW also won, in addition to all of the economic benefits, the right to strike over investment decisions and plant closures. Speaking of strikes, UAW Local 862, representing 9,000 workers at Ford's Kentucky truck plant, issued a strike notice over failure to come to an agreement on the local agreement over specifically health and safety provisions. In politics and legislation, AFL-CIO President Schuler and AFGE President Kelly are both attacking the proposed, quote, fiscal commission on Social Security for what it is, a scam meant to cut benefits for working people. A coalition of 7 labor unions representing 9 million workers, the UAW, SEIU, AFA-CWA, UE, IUPAT, APWU, the NEA, and NNU formed the National Labor Network for Ceasefire to put action towards working people's demands for justice in Palestine. A coalition of unions and community groups in Durham, North Carolina, UE Local 150, the Duke Graduate Workers Union, the Union of Southern Service Workers, and more, are holding a forum and discussion on Palestine today and what it has to do with our day-to-day fights on the job. An Alabama State Senate committee approved a bill to remove the requirement for schools to sign off on 14 and 15-year-olds having a job. It now moves to the full Senate. The Alabama Supreme Court made a decision on Friday determining that embryos at IVF clinics are persons under Alabama's Wrongful Death Act. A Florida Senate committee unanimously passed a bill that would allow 16 and 17-year-olds on construction sites that they had previously been barred from for safety concerns. And yes, that includes 2 Democrats. The bill now goes to the full Senate. Georgia's state Senate voted in favor of a bill that would bar companies that accept state incentives from voluntarily recognizing their workers' union. CWA members protested the proposed legislation. Amazon is now following the lead of SpaceX and Trader Joe's in attempting to get the National Labor Relations Board declared unconstitutional. And finally, in internal union affairs, bad news keeps coming from the Teamsters, with the latest being that Brian Kelly, a lawyer at a high-priced law firm that engages in union busting for companies and who is currently representing Donald Trump in a case to keep Trump off the ballot in Massachusetts, has reportedly been working for Shawn O'Brien in some capacity for over a year. If we missed anything, let us know, tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to go to a break, and we're going to be right back with Alabama State House candidate Marilyn Lands about her campaign and politics in Alabama. Stay tuned. Benefit Architects has proudly supported union members and union-made products for over 35 years. If you are a federal employee and an AFGE member, you're eligible for hundreds of dollars in money-saving benefits, including group life insurance, dental insurance, and AFLAC insurance. Additionally, if you're a union member but don't work for the federal government, you can still qualify for several of these money-saving policies. So give Tate Cure a call at 256-215-6769 for details and to enroll. Again, that is Tate Cure at 256-215-6769.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and family members are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough even to keep their jobs. We can fix this. It's time for us to find a way to close the health care coverage gap so that people can remain at work. Let's make this a priority. Let's close this gap and cover Alabama. To learn more and how you can help, visit coveralabama.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth shall go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. Thank you for tuning in. My co-host is Adam Keller. We've got now going on 30 people watching us on YouTube, but only 16 likes. Let's get those up. Like the stream if you haven't. Subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us as a podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star rating. Those really help. Appreciate everybody tuning in on the YouTube chat. Infinite Content, Kay, Brandon, Tempest Lord Rayhan, Benjo, Dylan, Connor, Colin, Kay. Appreciate all of you tuning in and your participation in the chat. On Facebook, we have Joe and Mel, as always. Thank you very much. We have on the line now Marilyn Lands. She is the Democratic nominee for Alabama State House District 10 in the special election coming up in March. She is a licensed professional counselor, which is pretty cool because my wife is also a counselor. So we have that in common. Marilyn, thank you for taking the time to talk to us this morning.
Oh, I am very happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Like I said, really glad to have you on. People that I know have spoken very highly of you. Mustafa from CWA Local 3905 really recommended folks check out your website and support your candidacy. And hearing union leaders say things like that means a lot to us, obviously, as a union radio program. So let's start with the race. I want to give you some time at the top to basically highlight what your priorities are and kind of give your spiel, and then we'll go into some more specific stuff that I have in mind. But, I guess the first thing is that this race is one of the few, how many are there, competitive races in the entire state of Alabama? Just talk to us about that.
Well, this is it, really. It's very exciting. I ran in 2022 and I came close to winning. I came very close. I was actually the closest to flipping a House seat in the entire state. And so I feel like we've got momentum on our side this time around. Probably folks know that we have the special on March 26th because the fellow who did beat me ended up resigning after he pled guilty to felony voter fraud charges. And so that's why District 10 has this special coming up and a real chance, I think, to change the trajectory of our state.
The guy who beat you, arrested for felony voter fraud, was he also a Democrat?
No, he was the Republican.
That's funny because I don't know. I always hear that Democrats are the ones doing voter fraud, but so I don't know. Maybe I just misheard. maybe everybody who says that is just actually wrong.
I think it's fake news.
Yeah, there you go. And I don't know if you know what the next closest state legislature race was in 2022, but I mean, I think it was something like 20 points. I mean, genuinely. The state has been so gerrymandered that this is probably the only actually competitive district in the entire state, and so that's a very exciting thing, I think, for voters in this district. What is the district? House District 10? Where does that?
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the other thing I'd like to say is that District 10 has had a history of electing moderate people because Mike Ball, who held this seat for 20 years, even though he was a Republican, he is a very moderate person. He's really worked hard to cross the aisle. He's a person with a lot of integrity that I really respect. And in keeping in that vein, in his tradition, he has actually endorsed me in this race.
That is a very interesting thing, and he's actually the person responsible for or one of the biggest pushers for the medical marijuana legislation here in Alabama, right?
Most definitely. That is Mike. Yeah, but District 10, we're a really unique and diverse district because we include a bit of Madison, Huntsville, but we have Southwest Huntsville and then South Huntsville to the river, but only west of the Parkway. We have the city of Triana. We have Redstone Arsenal. And then we have some unincorporated parts of the county. So it's not as homogeneous as most districts are. We also have all three school systems. So District 10 is a little complicated, and I feel like I have a unique ability to represent us down there because I've lived here all my life. I know all these places.
Right. And so why should folks in this area vote for you? What are your priorities? How are you going to seek to accomplish them while down in Montgomery?
Well, I'll say two things to that. One is that my campaign has really been a grassroots campaign from the very beginning. And over 90% of the money that my Republican opponent has raised has come from PACs and corporations. Whereas on the other hand, my race, over 90% of the money has come from individuals. Over 700 people have given to my campaign to date, and I'm really proud of that. We have a lot of support. And I think issue-wise, the biggest area of distinction between my opponent and I is the issue of abortion and reproductive health care. I continue to say that pregnancy is a really complex medical situation, and women need to make their own personal decisions that are best for them and their families. And I traveled to visit with a young woman in North Alabama, Alyssa Gonzalez, last month to talk with her. She was one of the people that was profiled in the Diane Sawyer special on The Brink. And Alyssa and her husband found out that they were pregnant with their second son. Very much a wanted pregnancy, very much a welcome addition to this family. And then tragically, a few months later, she found out that the child had a very rare genetic condition that meant the pregnancy was not viable. And because we had passed, the trigger law and started this whole landslide of other states following and putting these women in precarious situations, Alyssa and her family had to travel over 500 miles to get the health care that they needed. And I think this is just wrong. And I will work to repeal this exception and give Alabamians the freedom that they need to make their own healthcare decisions. I think that's an issue that's really on the line here, but there are many, many important issues. And unfortunately, so far, the legislature doesn't seem to be taking up any of them. And they're yeah, I've been paying close attention to what's going on down there. It's certainly not where I would be putting my energy.
Absolutely, and I've been very concerned with some of the stuff that we've been seeing coming out of Montgomery, and you said it's not where you would be putting your energy, and so I'm interested in that strategically, because going in, you would be in the super minority,
Yes.
not just in the minority, the super minority, and so how is that going to affect your behavior in office? As I see it, I think there are kind of like two paths that people could theoretically take. And one is being something of a kind of behind the scenes politician who's going to, collaborate with Republicans as much as possible, not make them angry, to try to rein them in, to try to get them to, okay, look, they're going to pass whatever they're going to pass, but I'm going to do everything I can to just make it as not bad as possible, right? Or do you see yourself going down to Montgomery and like preaching Jeremiads, really passionately going after Republicans and even, the Democrats where they deserve it, and presenting an alternate vision for Alabama? Which one of those would you see yourself being down in Montgomery?
Part of that I can't really answer until I get down there. I do think that I've got to be building a lot of relationships, and I do think my background makes me uniquely suited. I am a person who listens well. That's part of my training. I do want to hear about other views and make informed decisions, but I also think we need to call folks out on the fact that they're not really focusing on the important issues that need our attention right now. I mean, we really have big crises, big things at stake, and we're off in a lot of nonsense, I think. And I do think that we have a great delegation up here in Madison County. I think there are other people, in the supermajority that really do care about some of these same things. And I feel like, this is a seat we can take right now. We really ought to be able to win this one. And then in 2026, I think we're going to see a lot more change up here in Madison County, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, maybe even Mobile. So I think that whole trajectory is going to change a lot over the next few years. But I have the things that I am definitely going to be pushing and working and talking with people on both sides of the aisle about, sharing stories with people, because I think stories are what really change hearts and minds. And I am optimistic that I'll be able to go down with my collaborative spirit and get to know people and try to understand their perspectives, as well as share mine. And I hope to change some hearts and minds.
One of the big issues in the state right now is the UAW's campaign to organize the unorganized auto workers. And Alabama is actually, I think, going to be the single largest state in their campaign with our 50,000 auto workers. And, they've seen a lot of success really quickly. Two facilities in the state of Alabama have already hit 30% support, which is really, really quick. Back in one of those is Mercedes, and one of the workers told me that last time they've hit 30% before, but the last time they did, it took almost a year to hit 30%, and they've hit that in a month, right? And now they're closing in on 50%. So the campaign is really moving pretty quickly, and the Business Council of Alabama has announced that they're going to be engaging in a full-scale assault on these workers and their attempt to unionize. This is the same BCA, and the Business Council of Alabama, for folks who don't know, is basically in the same way that, unions are, organizations of workers. The Business Council is the organization of businesses, right, in the state of Alabama, chambers of commerce and things like this. And the same BCA actually endorsed several Democrats in the last election cycle in 2022. What is your relationship with the BCA?
Well, they have not endorsed me. They have endorsed in the 2022 race, they endorsed my opponent, and they've endorsed my opponent again this time.
Gotcha. Would you, if they did endorse you, or if they were to endorse you in the future, would that be something, especially considering their recent actions, that you would refuse?
I haven't thought about that. But I will say, I think if they won't endorse at this point. But one of the concerns I have, I think, is that BCA doesn't seem to focus much on small business. And that's been a concern of mine in talking with them. But I firmly believe that labor has worked hard, long and hard, to be able to organize, and that's something we should be able to exercise in this state. And I have a history with labor. It's I have a couple of stories too. One is I was able to work my way through school because I had a job at a grocery store, which was a union job. And so I made more money and I had better benefits than my friends. And that showed me right away the power of a union to be able to provide quality jobs. And I also had a grandfather who was a Teamster. And I can remember as a child, he would sometimes stop over in Huntsville on his way wherever he was going and park his big rig not far from our house. And I remember him teaching me how to get, other truckers to blow their horn at me. And so now whenever I pass a trucker on the interstate, that always makes me think of my gramps. So I think the labor issue really just resonates with me because of my own personal history with it.
I would also just note for listeners that you were endorsed in 2022 by the Alabama AFL-CIO. I don't know if they've made an endorsement in this race, but I wouldn't expect
They have.
They have? Okay, great.
They have, and the machinist and aerospace workers have, as well as our CWA local that you mentioned earlier.
I didn't realize that the machinists had. That's great.
Yes.
So another one of the big issues in the state right now that Republicans are trying to push is school choice. What are your thoughts on that issue of quote unquote school choice, and where would you fall if you were in Montgomery?
Well, I think I could only support school privatization if I could be assured that it would protect and maintain our public school funding. And I'm concerned about the legislation that's being offered. One of the things is that it would virtually eliminate the further reduction to our grocery tax, which is an issue I care about very dearly because I feel like, we're one of only a handful of states that tax groceries. And that is a burden to our families here that needs to happen. And the way this is written right now, that eliminates it. And I'm a product of public education. My son went to public schools here. We're lucky in North Alabama to have such great public schools, but we don't have the same across the state. And I think that if we erode the funding we have, we need to be giving more to the current public school systems, not diverting funds from that. It's a complex issue, but we have to put giving every child in Alabama a quality education at the forefront of whatever we do. And I just don't see it happening under the program that's being outlined. But I'm certainly willing. I'm a creative problem solver. I love to brainstorm with people and do mind maps. And I think, there are maybe some ways that we can look at this and approach this. I know there was some real concern, especially in District 10, where some of our unincorporated Madison County residents have to go to Madison County High School, which is, an hour and a half, could be even a 3-hour round trip bus ride for children. And I get that there are some problems that we need to address. But I don't think what we're looking at right now does enough to ensure that whatever we do to try and fix some of the real problems that there are doesn't affect our current public school funding, which needs to be increased as it is. And we need that grocery tax. We need that grocery tax elimination.
Staying on the subject of children across the country, we've seen a bunch of bills to try to loosen child labor regulations. In Indiana, Republicans were trying to make it so that children as young as 14 could go back into the coal mines. In Florida, they've got a bill that would allow children to work during school up to 6 days a week, 8 hours a day, whereas previously there were restrictions on how many days in a week, how many days consistently you could work, and you could only work up to 4 hours in one day during the school year. And in Alabama, what we're seeing a version of that here, and that is to Senator Arthur Orr has a bill that would eliminate the requirement for 14 and 15-year-olds to have authorization from their school saying that, yes, this child is doing well enough educationally that they can take on this job after school, and we sign off on it. That's the requirement right now for 14 and 15-year-olds. And he wants to get away with that. How would you react to legislation like that?
I don't like the sound of that at all. I mean, and I worked at 15. I started working at 15, but that just sounds like a bad idea all around.
Yeah, seems to be that way too. You got because the school's not going to not authorize a child that's doing well or even, moderately well academically. The only people that they wouldn't authorize to work at 14 or 15 is people who are failing or consistently making D's. And so, the explicit aim is like, oh, this 14-year-old is failing school, let him go work. Seems bad.
We need to figure out why that child is failing and give him the resources or the tools there to be able to succeed in life. And maybe that's, diverting them into a vocational program. But and then we've got such a problem now too with labor trafficking. And that just my son has been working on some of that, and it's just horrific what's happening, and so many people are not aware of it.
Right. Yeah, and that's really another very important dimension of these child labor bills. The people that this is going to be affecting is not going to be, Arthur Orr's children, just to put it bluntly, right?
Yes.
So economic development in the state of Alabama. We have been doling out, billions of dollars to corporations with virtually no strings attached. What would be your approach to economic development?
Well, first of all, I'd say, North Alabama really excels at economic development. We have a lot to be proud of here. But I think I keep coming back around to the fact that we don't have economic equality for all Alabama's families here. And I think that's what we need to prioritize. I'm about growth, of course, but I don't want us to leave people behind. And I'm afraid that's what we're doing so often. I think we need to prioritize higher wages and good benefits whenever we hand out tax credits. It's good for quality of life. It's good for everybody. It's fiscally sound, and people who make more pay more in taxes, and they spend more. But I think we really need to be concerned about everybody being able to have a living wage, not to have to work 2 and 3 jobs. To be able to have the basic necessities here. And that's why I'm so adamant about eliminating the grocery tax. I think we need to be helping our families here.
Finally, Medicaid expansion. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Medicaid expansion is long overdue. And all the experts and healthcare professionals have been telling us that we needed to do that for years. We are losing billions here. We've left money on the table that we could have for education now. So, it's time to do that. Our rural healthcare situation is just a mess. We're losing doctors in this state. We need to do that now.
Marilyn Lands, Democratic nominee for Alabama State House District 10. The election is on March 26th. Where can people learn more about
Tuesday,
your
March
campaign?
26th. Yes. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Where can folks learn more about your
Okay.
campaign?
So our website is marilynlands.com, all one word. It's MarilynLands.com. And again, they can see our district map and find out if they live there or not. And also they can see how I stand on issues across the board, and also find out ways they can plug in and volunteer and come out and knock doors and help us win this thing.
All right. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Enjoyed being here, Jacob.
Yep. Good talking. Marilyn Lands, Alabama State House District 10 Democratic nominee. MarilynLands.com is where you can find out more. Appreciate her time. We are going to go ahead and take our final break, and we are going to be right back with Boss Watch, and we're going to be breaking down some of the tax system in Alabama. It's going to be a very, very sexy conversation, so don't go anywhere, folks.
In Alabama, more than 200,000 of our friends and neighbors are living without health care coverage. Often folks can't stay healthy enough to keep their jobs. We need to fix this. Let's close the health care coverage gap. To learn more, visit coveralabama.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law. You need attorneys always available to take care of you. Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law. And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case. Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio program. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We've got a phone number and the line is open, 844-899-TVLR. It is 844-899-8857. You can call in, give us your thoughts about the program, any questions that you might have, particularly as it relates to unions and labor law and such things. That's where we're going to be the most likely to have an answer for you. You can ask us about anything. 844-899-TVLR. Just a teaser really quick before we get into our next segment. We are going to, in the second half of the program, which is now going to be, we are no longer going to be free from the shackles of the FCC censors in overtime. Overtime will be broadcast on terrestrial FM radio. But we can still curse. We'll just get our audio guy to edit it out and post. So we'll still be free while we're live, but unfortunately there is going to be a censored version lurking out there on the internet. So anyway, in the second half of the program, we have Tom Sexton from the Trillbilly Workers Party, a very big podcast that is out of Whitesburg, Kentucky. Actually, the literal exact same town that we are going to be on the radio in. That's where they're from, the Trillbilly Workers Party. They are some folks from Appalachia who have a left-wing podcast. Very big. So Tom is coming on to celebrate our Kentucky debut. So you don't want to miss that, folks. If you're listening to us on the radio, find us online so that you can hear that. The Valley Labor Report on Facebook and YouTube is where you're going to be able to hear that chat. So, Adam, Alabama has a we've got a system of taxation that is, not exactly unique among the South, among Southern states, but is taking things to a little bit even further, let's say, than even our other southern neighbors. Can you talk to us about what's going on with the system of taxation in Alabama?
Sure, yeah. I want to start with something that was brought up in the last segment with the candidate Marilyn Lands, and she mentioned that the grocery tax, right? Alabama is one of a handful of states that taxes groceries. Last year, there was progress made, and there was actually 1 cent cut off the grocery tax. There was supposed to be another cent cut off this year if the Education Trust Fund, which is where this revenue goes, could sustain it. And interestingly enough, the state of Alabama has determined that we cannot afford to cut the grocery tax further this year. However, the same folks down there are pushing the school choice, which would drain the Education Trust Fund budget, right? So you can afford to subsidize private schools for affluent families, but you can't afford to cut the grocery tax another penny to help out poor and working class folks in the state. And that tells you, that little example tells you a lot about the way Alabama runs its tax system. There were a couple of reports that were put out towards the end of last year that I want to just highlight because, I think it's worth mentioning. Alabama's taxation system is both highly inadequate and highly regressive, meaning we don't raise enough revenue to provide a decent level of public services. The stuff that taxes pay for, right? Schools, roads, other infrastructure, various forms of social welfare, and any across the board areas, Alabama struggles. And so Alabama is inadequate in the amount of revenue it raises. It's also highly regressive in that the taxes that we do raise, while it's not enough to actually fund decent public services, it does disproportionately impact poor and working class folks. So a couple of key findings from a report put out by PARCA, it's the Public Affairs Research Council of Alabama. They look at this stuff every year. And the report they put out at the end of 2023 was looking at fiscal year 2021. But here's the highlights. Alabama collected less in state and local taxes than all but one other state. So we ranked 49th out of 50th. The one that had less was Alaska, thanks to disruptions in the oil market over that period. They actually had the lowest per capita revenues in that year. But, that's kind of a strange case and a unique case. Alabama's per capita property tax collections are the lowest in the nation. So that does help owners of homes and farms and quote-unquote timberland, but it creates a revenue deficit, leaving state and local governments with less to spend to provide government services such as education, health, and public safety. So we have the lowest property taxes, but our state and local sales tax rates are among the highest in the country. To offset that, Alabama's income tax does not provide the balancing effect that income taxes in other states do. Low-income workers begin paying taxes at a lower threshold than any other state. Right? This is Alabama, supposedly home of small government, anti-tax conservatives. But as a worker, your income is getting taxed at a lower threshold here in this state than anywhere else in the country. At the other end of the spectrum, Alabama is the only state that allows a full deduction for federal income taxes that are paid, the FIT deduction. And that is a tax break that benefits high-income earners, right? The wealthiest folks are who actually get to claim that deduction and benefit from it. So over fiscal year 21, the state collected about $4,200 per resident, $4,237, which is almost $1,200 less than the average in the country. The average per capita total in the Southeast was $4,556, which is $319 per person higher than Alabama, right? So we have lower revenue per capita, per person, than even our southeastern neighbors. And this one was really interesting to me. Mississippi collects $204 more per capita than Alabama. And, in Alabama, a lot of folks like to say, thank God for Mississippi, right? Because a lot of times if we're ranked 49th, they're ranked 50th. But you can't say that about per capita revenue. Ryan Hankins from the Public Affairs Research Council of Alabama said, quote, most state and local tax revenue can be grouped into one of three categories: property taxes, sales taxes, and income taxes. Ideally, the state would draw an equal amount from these sources, but that is not true in Alabama. Alabama has the country's lowest per capita property tax collections. It starts taxing income earlier than every other state, I should say, and it has among the highest sales tax rates in the U.S. That means the state's poorest residents shoulder a higher tax burden than their wealthy counterparts. If you look more closely at the data, Alabama collected more taxes per capita on alcoholic beverages and public utilities than most other states, right? So we're not taxing large property owners, and we're giving generous deductions to high-income earners, but we're taxing the hell out of alcohol and public utilities. The state ranked 2nd and 5th, respectively, in those two areas, right? The 2nd highest taxes on alcohol, the 5th highest taxes per capita on public utilities. But again, collected the lowest property tax per capita in the country. So
just really quick before you go further, you've said we collect more from sales taxes. We start income taxes earlier. We have the lowest property taxes. Why is it, and then therefore Alabama's taxation system is regressive? It hits the lowest income earners first and hardest.
Right.
Why is it that it is more regressive to collect money from sales taxes than property taxes or income taxes? What is it about that makes it regressive?
Yeah, it's going to be a higher share of your income, right? So the more poor you are, the higher the percentage of your income is going to these taxes, right? And you think about it. If you're a millionaire, the grocery tax is irrelevant to you, right? A few pennies on a dollar doesn't really make a big difference to you when you check out at the grocery store. But if you make $20,000 a year, that grocery tax really stings. And, the other part of that is the poorest folks don't own property by and large, right? And often are renters. And so, generally speaking, especially these large land holdings, right? We're talking about wealthier folks. And when we're talking about timberland, there's a whole lot of land that is classified as timberland in the state of Alabama. You can debate whether it really should be or not, but it gets taxed at a very low rate. And so, your grandma who does own a home, their property tax is even stinging them worse than the big landowners. But yeah, the sales tax it is regressive. It punishes you the less you make. And so the fact that we tax groceries, the fact that the taxes themselves are so reliant on sales taxes, that is pretty unique to the state. It's a bad recipe because, like I said, you're not raising enough to actually, have a good quality of life, but the taxes are a burden on low-income folks. And so if you hear working class people in Alabama say that they feel like they're taxed too much, there's truth to that, right? If you hear wealthy people in Alabama say they're taxed too much, they're full of it.
Right.
Because, again, they have these deductions. They have the low property taxes. So if you own 2, 3, 4 homes, okay, the low property taxes really benefit you. You're not worried about the high sales taxes. So a few things that I wanted to...
Well, and on that actually, that made me think that, if you own 2 or 3 homes and you're renting and you're a landlord, not only is your property taxed at a lower rate than it would be your property is taxed at a lower rate in Alabama than it would be anywhere else in the country. But on top of that, if your income is primarily dependent on rent, then it's not actually classified as salary income, and it's not subject to the income tax. It's subject to the capital gains tax, which is taxed at a lower rate than the income tax.
Right. So, I mean, the system of taxes in Alabama is designed to keep wealthy folks wealthy and poor folks poor. That's the way it is set up. It's set up to produce lower tax revenue, which could then be reinvested in public services. It's set up to actually make inequality worse. There was another report put out by ITEP. ITEP put out a tax inequality index, and it measures the effects of each state's tax system on income inequality. And according to this measure, Alabama has the 12th most regressive state and local tax system in the country. Income disparities are larger in Alabama after state and local taxes are collected than before. Right? So inequality actually gets worse in our state because of our taxes, which is, pretty much the opposite of what the whole idea of progressive taxation was supposed to be, right? It's to kind of level off inequality. The more you earn, the more you can pay, right? So it works in the reverse effect there. And that is why you see Alabama rank at or near the bottom on any metric of quality of life, right? Because we're not actually investing in our people. We're taxing poor and working folks who can't really afford it, but those who can afford it, the big corporations, the very wealthiest among us, the big, large landowners, right? They are getting away with minimal taxation. So it's a system that is designed to maintain poverty in this state, right? Because they tell us they can't afford to make investments in people. They tell us they can't afford public transportation, right? They can't afford universal pre-K. They can't afford child care supports, and on and on and on. They've claimed they can't afford Medicaid expansion, right? They say that they can't afford these things. That's arguable, but to the extent any of that's true, it's because of the way we tax. So tax the wealthy, tax the big property owners, the people who actually have the money. I don't know. Just common sense for me is if you're looking for money, you go where the money is. And for poor and working class people, there's just not that much to give. We're already giving a lot to sales taxes. So, yeah, I do appreciate that Ms. Lands brought that issue up, because the grocery tax, it is highly regressive. We are one of the few states that does it. It's a shame to tax the necessities of life while you are giving these generous tax breaks to the wealthiest earners and huge subsidies and incentives to big corporations, right? Why should working class people pay more in taxes than your boss and your landlord?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. And so just to really hammer this home, if you are in the lowest 20% of earners, you make less than $20,000 a year, nearly 12% of your income is going to taxes in Alabama.
Wow.
Whereas if you are in the top 1%, only 5.4% of your income is going to taxes, right? So the share of income going to taxes is more than double if you're poor compared to the richest. It's a backward system. I think that's really wild to me that the top 1% are paying 5.4% of their income towards taxes, and the poorest 20% are paying 11.9%. Yeah, so I know I threw a lot of numbers out at you, but the takeaway is, the wealthier you are in Alabama, by and large, the system is designed to help you and keep you that way. The poorer you are, the higher percentage of your income is going to taxes, which is a real shame, because then you experience, as a working class person, the decline, the lack of public services that we would have in other states. I mean, as I say a lot, Alabama is probably one of the worst places to be a working class person in the entire developed world. If you just look at healthcare, transportation, infrastructure, education, job quality, job rights, you name it, freedom.
Right.
Freedom. I mean, it's really it's a backward system. It's designed for underinvestment. It's designed to keep people down, really, and keep those on top. And so I really do believe that we could do much, much better. There's a lot of wealth in this state, but we, the people, are not benefiting.
Yep, it really puts the lie to the to the conservative refrains about freedom and liberty and small government and low taxation and if you actually look at the system for what it is, you'll see that it's all very, very convenient for the people at the top and not so much for everybody else. So there's some food for thought to think about as you are going about your day and your week over this legislative session, as the legislators will no doubt continue to try to find ways to further cut taxes for wealthy people. Every time you hear about a tax cut proposal, think about who it's going to benefit. there was another business tax cut last year. And it's obviously, that's not something that's going to benefit working people in the state of Alabama. So anytime you hear anything else about tax cuts, think about that we collect less taxes than anywhere else in the United States. And then think about who that tax cut is going to benefit. 9 times out of 10, it's going to benefit wealthy people.
Right. And I will say that there is currently a tax cut that's being debated in the legislature that I would agree with, which is to remove the sales tax on diapers, baby formula, feminine hygiene products. Believe it or not, it's Senator Arthur Orr who's sponsoring that bill. I disagree with virtually everything he stands for typically, but it's a good bill. That's an example of where you could cut taxes in a way that actually benefits regular working people. Of course, again, you have to think about the revenue impact, right? Because this is going to our public schools, and our public schools are not particularly well funded, obviously, given the lack of revenue. So, it's a delicate thing there. But the bottom line is we need a much more fair tax system. I mean, at the very least, we need a much more fair tax system that will lift up poor and working people by taxing the wealthy.
Absolutely. Every single week, workers are on the move, and so are bosses. And so we like to take a look at what bosses were up to last week, particularly in light of the fact that every evening on the local news, you're going to see the mugshot of some poor soul who stole some chapstick at the local CVS. And you're not going to see a whole lot of mugshots of bosses, despite the fact that theft by bosses, wage theft, things like this, account for more theft than all other property crime combined. They don't like you knowing that. You are just as likely to get killed on the job than you are as you are to be murdered, right? And so, folks don't. Despite that, you're not going to see a whole lot of stories about that on the news. You're not going to see mugshots of bosses and people responsible for that, for the theft and killing of working people. So we like to do what we can to provide a corrective. And so every week we have a segment called Boss Watch where we do just that. This week we're going to start in Florida, where a federal investigation into the death of a 39-year-old maintenance employee found that the two contractors responsible for the job site could have prevented the incident by communicating and following safety rules designed to prevent the unexpected startup of machinery. Investigators with the Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration found that on August 4th, 2023, a worker employed by GNR Mineral Services Incorporated, a Birmingham, Alabama-based maintenance and repair contractor who was hired by HM Southeast Cement, LLC, was performing repairs on a screw conveyor system mounted on top of a cement silo. Despite the equipment being locked out and de-energized, the employer made the decision to remove the locks temporarily and energize the equipment to rotate the screw conveyor shaft to align the equipment for the repair. As a result, the worker was caught in the conveyor and suffered fatal injuries. OSHA cited GNR Mineral for 3 serious violations for failing to remove employees from areas surrounding unguarded screw conveyors, failing to establish specific procedures for controlling hazardous energy, and failing to inform the host employer of their lockout-tagout procedures. The agency proposed $38,000 in penalties for GNR Mineral. The agency also cited HM Southeast Cement for 3 serious violations and proposed $43,000 to that employer. OSHA found that the employer failed to establish specific procedures for controlling hazardous energy, perform periodic inspections of the energy control procedures to prevent accidental contact with ingoing nip points and rotating parts, and review and coordinate lockout-tagout procedures with its contractor. So totally unnecessary death. Could have been prevented if you followed the law. Nationwide and across the South, the U.S. Department of Labor does impact inspections on mines. The U.S. Department of Labor announced last week that its Mine Safety and Health Administration completed impact inspections at 16 mines in 11 states in December 2023, issuing 247 violations. The Mine Safety and Health Administration's impact inspections in 2023 identified a total of 2,739 violations, including 764 significant and substantial violations and 56 unwarrantable failure findings. A significant and substantial violation is one that is reasonably likely to cause a reasonably serious injury or illness. Violations designated as unwarrantable failures occur when an inspector finds aggravated conduct that constitutes more than ordinary negligence. The agency conducts impact inspections at mines that merit increased agency attention and enforcement due to poor compliance history, previous accidents, injuries and illnesses, and other compliance concerns. Of the 247 violations that MSHA identified in December, 57 were evaluated as significant and substantial, and 3 had unwarrantable failure findings. The agency completed these inspections at mines in Alabama, Kentucky, Missouri, Texas, West Virginia, and other states. The Excel No. 5 mine, an underground coal mine in Varney, Kentucky, was among the mines MSHA inspected in December. MSHA selected the mine for an impact inspection based on numerous criteria, including enforcement history and plan compliance and examination issues. The mine is operated by Excel Mining, and the inspection identified 20 violations at this one mine alone, including 9 significant and substantial violations and 2 unwarrantable failure findings. So like half of the violations in December came from this one mine. Specifically, MSHA inspectors found the following conditions existing at Excel No. 5 mine. Inadequate workplace examinations. Inadequate examinations have contributed to fatal mine accidents and disabling injuries and were identified as a root cause in several mining fatalities the industry suffered in 2023. MSHA has placed a priority on improving workplace examinations, including the identification, correction, and documentation of hazardous conditions to ensure miners' safety and health. And other serious violations included not adequately supporting roof and ribs and inoperable fire warning devices. Inoperable fire warning device. I mean, that is, and not adequately supporting the roof. Anytime you think of a mine accident, those are the first 2 things you think of: the mine collapsing and an explosion, fire. Both of those things were going unaddressed in this mine. Absolutely unacceptable. In Georgia, Covenant Woods Senior Living, LLC, and Bright Space Senior Living, LLC, together Covenant Woods, which operate the Covenant Woods Retirement Community in Columbus, Georgia, violated federal law when they fired a 78-year-old employee from her position as a receptionist because of her age and disability. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission charged in a lawsuit filed last week. According to the lawsuit, the receptionist, who was recognized as one of Covenant Woods' Employees of the Year in January of 2022, was employed by the company for over 14 years until her sudden termination in February of 2022. In that month, the receptionist was briefly hospitalized. Upon her release from the hospital, the receptionist was asked by Covenant Woods' general manager how long she planned to continue to work, whether she needed to work, and whether she would like to spend her time traveling and seeing family instead of working. despite the receptionist's insistence that she intended to continue working, and despite having never previously raised any substantial performance concerns to the receptionist, the general manager told the receptionist that Covenant Woods no longer had confidence in her ability to work, citing her recent hospitalization. The company fired her the next day and replaced her with significantly younger employees. Super blatant stuff there. I mean, employee of the year 1 month and then fired the next month. That's that's bonkers. Looney Tunes. Had a couple of dishonorable mentions. Investigators with the U.S. Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division found Old Jose Grill and Cantina stole from their workers when the employer improperly paid tipped employees time and 1/2 their cash wage for hours over 40 in a work week, instead of time and 1/2 the applicable minimum wage. Additionally, the employer misclassified one tipped employee as an independent contractor, paid kitchen staff a flat rate for all hours worked with no overtime premium, and failed to keep hours worked records for the back-of-the-house kitchen employees. The Department of Labor recovered $167,000 in back wages and damages to 17 employees. The U.S. Department of Labor recovered $460,000 in back wages and damages after federal investigators found Guanajuato Supermarket in Houston, Texas, failed to pay 104 workers overtime wages. I mean, $500,000 stole from these workers. All you got to do is pay it back. And yet you're going to see, you look on the news next week, and you're probably going to see somebody who stole petty theft from a CVS. You're going to see their mugshot on the news. But not those bosses that stole $500,000 from their workers. It's absolutely, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. We've got a few minutes here before we wrap up the first half of the show. 844-899 TVLR is the phone number. 844-899-8857. If you want to call in, you can call the show there. Or if you're listening to us after we go off the air, you can still leave us a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. Adam, what else is going on in Alabama that we should talk about right now?
Well, in the legislative session, they had their second week, and so there's a lot going through. We mentioned it earlier. There is a child labor bill, which is being sponsored by Representative Dubose in the House and Senator Arthur Orr in the Senate. And what this would do is take away the certification to work forms that the schools fill out for 14 and 15-year-olds. Very concerned about that. I really don't think that 14 and 15-year-olds, I don't think we need more 14 and 15-year-olds in the workforce. Right. And they're claiming this is going to remove barriers to the workforce. That's pretty wild to me. And let's be real about it. This is a concerted effort happening in state after state, backed by billionaire money. And this is a reaction to a very tight labor market. Workers have some more leverage now than we did a few years back because of this tight labor market. And so their solution is, well, let's just flood the market with more children. Very concerned about that bill. It did pass out of Senate committee this past week. So if you are an Alabama listener and you are also concerned, might want to reach out to your state senator this week. Really, really recommend that. Also want to mention there's a couple other things going on. Libraries are under attack, and the Department of Archives are under attack. Very unfortunate to see that happening. There's efforts to change the law such that librarians could actually be arrested, if they were deemed to be committing, obscene acts based on, I guess, woke books is what they're talking about. It's very, very disturbing to see these attacks on freedom of information, freedom of expression, education, learning, and knowledge. The Department of Archives is under attack because they held a gay history exhibit. It was just a history exhibit about gay Alabamians. And they are being accused of, like, obscenities, basically. It's very gross, right? It's just sexualizing people's very identity, right? Just because something is a gay history exhibit doesn't mean there's anything sexual about it. It's just talking about, hey, these Alabamians made a difference in our state's history. Let's look at it. Let's talk about it.
That really
disturbing.
that really is one of the more, revealing culture war battles that's being fought right now in Alabama, because the whole thing about the Alabama Department of Archives and History is, if you actually look at the presentation that was given that elicited this reaction, there was not any. It was not. Being gay is great. More people should be gay. More people should be trans. Here's how we can trans the kids. It was right. Just, hey, these were Alabamians who were queer, and here's some of the impact that they had on the state's history. And the same person attacking the Alabama Department of Archives and History for this event, it was not funded by any tax dollars at all. The same people attacking it are the very ones who would defend Confederate monuments staying up in public places, obviously reverentially, saying that, oh, we can't, and as they defend it, they're not going to actually do what they want to do or what they think their base wants them to do, which is defend the Confederacy. They're going to say, oh, it was, a dark time in our history, and we need to, we can't erase history. We have to learn from it, right? We have to, and so therefore we have to have reverential statues in public. It doesn't even make any sense if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. If you believe them, if you take them at face value, that it's just about history, and it's not about reverence for a revanchist, reactionary, racist attempt at overthrowing the American government. But if you take them at their word that it's just about history, the argument falls apart in 2 seconds. But if we want to take them at their history and say, like, these people are just, totally neutrally concerned about learning the history of the state of Alabama, and we have to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly, and we shouldn't have, moral limits on what can and can't be learned. I mean, all of that I agree with. I think we should learn the good, the bad, and the ugly of Alabama's history. And I think we should learn about the history of the Confederacy. And I don't think it should be sugar-coated. And I don't think that it has to be hyperbolized, right? I think we should just learn about it. If they actually believe that, obviously a relevant facet of Alabama's history is the contribution of queer Alabamians who existed in time. I mean, really, queer Alabamians, LGBT Alabamians before, the 2010s. Were living in a society that was violently, actually physically, violently antagonistic to their existence. And so, learning about their contributions to Alabama is absolutely something that should be done. Something that should be done if you just care about history and you're not, concerned about creating a mythologized past and, shielding people from parts of our history. Anyway, it's just, that's absolutely bizarre to me that there are people that go out there and make this argument.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's some other things happening down there in Montgomery. As we're wrapping up, the gambling bill did pass the House, so keep your eyes peeled on that to see what happens there. But yeah, lots of culture war, nasty stuff happening down in Montgomery. So folks need to be engaged. Folks need to be paying attention. Folks need to be blowing up their legislators' inboxes. I should say. Don't blow them up. Just blow up their inbox via email and phone calls and text messages. See them in person if you can. Talk to them. We got to put pressure on these folks to try to, destroy some bad bills and push some positive bills through.
You got some plugs for us the last 90 seconds here?
Yeah, labornotes.org/events. Check out their virtual trainings as well as the Labor Notes Conference coming up in April. Our friends at Indoor Air Care Advocates released a new video on their YouTube channel. Recommend folks check that out. You can go to iaqadvocates.org/demand clean air to learn more about why we need clean air and how you can help. The Poor People's Campaign is holding a march and a rally in Montgomery on March 2nd, that Saturday. And the very next day in Selma will be the Selma Jubilee anniversary, and there will be a big march and rally there as well. And so Southern Workers Assembly is hosting a virtual discussion called Operation Dixie, Lessons for Southern Workers on Thursday, February 29th at 6 p.m. Central. Go to southernworker.org to register and learn more. AFL-CIO is holding an organizing institute in Birmingham this April 17th through 19th. Definitely check that out if you're interested in learning more about organizing and organizing in the workplace specifically. Alabama Rise is hosting its annual legislative day on April 2nd. Go to alarise.org if you want to learn more. And that's all I got for you.
See you in the second half of the show. Okay, all right. We are off of the radio. Appreciate everybody sticking around. We've got a great second half of the show ready.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
We're going to be talking to Sarah Lazare, editor of Workday Magazine, which is just a really super cool thing that they have in Minnesota, and about the UAW's being able to reopen the Belvidere assembly plant in Illinois. It's a very important, there's so many important things about this strike, but this is easily one of the most important things that the UAW was able to do during their strike, is to get to Stellantis to commit to reopening Belvidere. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about how the UAW is going to hold Stellantis to account to make sure that the Belvidere assembly plant is actually reopened. They've got it in the contract, but right now it's just words on paper until it actually happens. So she's going to talk to us about how that's going to happen, and we're going to be talking to Tom Sexton from the Trillbilly Workers Party. Going to be talking to him, just generally chatting it up, and I have some clips that I'm going to have him react to. I think it'll be a good time. Looking forward to it. So, folks, stay tuned. We're going to be right back with Overtime.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio program, and now Kentucky's only union radio program? I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Let us know.
Let us know, Kentucky listeners. Really excited to be talking to y'all in Whitesburg, Kentucky on WMMT Possum Community Radio, 88.7 FM. Really excited about that. Before we got on the radio with y'all, we used to say in overtime was previously online only, so we were free from the shackles of the FCC censors. But we're going to be where we put on the chains again, just to talk to you. So really excited about that. Give us a call if you're hearing us for the first time on WMMT in Whitesburg, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Leave us a voicemail. Let us know what you thought about our debut episode on WMMT. Really looking forward to talking to Tom Sexton from Kentucky's Trillbilly Workers Party podcast here later on in the hour. Here in just a few minutes, we're going to be talking to Sarah Lazare, editor of Workday Magazine, about the UAW's fight to make sure that the Belvidere assembly plant is reopened. But before we get to Sarah, there was some more UAW news that I wanted to make sure to bring y'all.
And before you get into that, I just wanted to encourage, especially those new listeners, check out our YouTube channel. Check out some of the interviews that we've done. We have had some really amazing guests over the last couple years, and you might find something you like.
Cornell West interview just went up.
That's right.
So you can listen to us talk to Cornell, or listen to Adam talk to Cornell.
That's right. We have talked to historians and union leaders and rank and file workers and activists of various stripes. So definitely check out our YouTube channel. Look around. You'll find something you like, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so UAW in the news a lot, and last week, Jim Farley and Shawn Fain traded barbs in the media again, with Jim Farley being the antagonist, saying that, basically implying that because of the UAW strike last year in 2023, Ford might outsource some of their new production, specifically EV production. This because his feelings were really hurt that Ford's Kentucky truck plant went on strike. So said that they will, quote, think carefully about where it builds future vehicles. Ford's highly profitable factory in Louisville, Kentucky, the Kentucky truck plant, was the first plant that the UAW shut down with a strike. Farley said, as the company looks at the transition from internal combustion to electric vehicles, quote, we have to think carefully about our manufacturing footprint. Quote, our reliance on the UAW turned out to be we were the first truck plant to be shut down, Farley told the conference. And actually, the article says it was the first plant to be shut down. I don't think that's accurate. It's not accurate. In fact, I'm almost positive there were other plants shut down before the Kentucky truck plant, because it was a very big deal when the Kentucky truck plant was actually the last plant to be struck at Ford. It was the first truck plant to be struck. It was not the first plant to be struck. It was the first truck plant to be struck. That's relevant because trucks are more profitable than other cars. So anyway, our reliance on the UAW turned out to be we were the first truck plant to be shut down, Farley told a press conference. Really, our relationship has changed. It's been a watershed moment for the company. Does this have business impact? Yes. In response to Farley's comments, Union President Shawn Fain said in a statement Thursday that Ford should stay focused on building the best auto industry, not on a race to lower wages. Quote, maybe Ford doesn't need to move factories to find the cheapest labor on earth. Maybe it needs to recommit to American workers and find a CEO who's interested in the future of this country's auto industry. I think that is exactly right. And, what this does is makes it all the more important that in addition to the record contracts as it relates to compensation that the UAW was able to achieve, which were really remarkable, taking the top wage to $42 an hour and decreasing the progression to 3 years to get there. 27% raises over the course of the contract before you take into account COLA, which brings the estimated total wage increase of the top rate to 33%, with the starting rate raising over 60% over the course of the contract. I mean, a lot of really good stuff for auto workers at Ford in this contract. In addition to that, they were able to win the right to strike over investment decisions and plant closures at the entire company. So if Ford decides that they want to try to make EVs in Mexico, previously the UAW would have been shackled by their contract if Ford made that decision. They would have not been able legally to strike. Now, does that mean they can't strike? No, actually, illegal strikes are possible and they're good, and you should do them sometimes. You should recognize the cost and the potential risks, right? But that doesn't mean just because it's illegal doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But there was that added risk if the UAW had previously struck over an investment decision or a plant closure. But now they have it codified in their contract that during the contract term, they have the right to strike over plant closures and investment decisions. And what it means that they have that legal right is that if they had done it where they had said they would not do it, then they could be sued for even potentially, I think, lost profit, right? I mean, there's real serious financial consequences for striking inside of the contract if your contract doesn't allow you to strike for this specific reason. So that gives the UAW so much more leverage than they would have had otherwise when it comes to investment decisions like that. And so there's going to be a big fight if Farley tries to make good on this on these threats, and we'll see how much it is, how much these words are just threats, how much they're just, barks from a dog, or how much intent there is behind that, right? Because it could be potentially that he's just saying this, and and he knows what the ramifications would be if he tried to do this, and he just wants to try to scare the UAW into compliance and into, the more docile temperament that they have had for the last 50 years or so. But Shawn Fain's response really shows that doesn't seem like that's going to be happening. So we're going to keep a close look on that, and it's a very important story. The Biden administration was asked about it. Karine Jean-Pierre was asked at the White House press briefing, and that they said that the Biden administration will do everything that they can to make sure that Ford does not make good on those threats to outsource production. They want to do everything that they can to keep Ford producing here. And really it's such a slap in the face to the American public that Ford really any of these companies are even considering doing this when the American public has subsidized the EV industry and these auto industries to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. We just talked last week to Bianca Cunningham in Tennessee, who is organizing around holding Ford accountable to the community in Memphis, where they are building their new Blue Oval manufacturing plant that has received $3 billion for this one manufacturing plant just from the state of Tennessee. And that's on top of $9 billion from the U.S. government. $9 billion from the U.S. government. And, it's worth comparing that number, $9 billion for one plant from the federal government, $3 billion from the state. Let's compare that to the total estimated cost of the new expenses from the UAW contract. That total expense over the entire 4.5 years of the contract, the total increased labor cost is $8.8 billion. It's less than even the subsidy from just the federal government for one manufacturing plant, right? I mean, so, when they throw out these big numbers and they make it sound like, oh, no, labor's going crazy. They're so greedy. They're taking so much from these poor companies. Just remember, $8.8 billion. That sounds like a lot for the workers. What are some other numbers going around in this industry with this company? $9 billion from the federal government for one plant. I mean, it's just, it's a total farce. It's a total farce. And Shawn Fain sees that for what it is. And it looks like the rest of the UAW is seeing that for what it is. And it looks like the rest of the auto industry is seeing that for what it is. Have we got Sarah Lazare on the line?
We do.
Fantastic. Sarah Lazare is the editor for Workday Magazine. She was the former editor, former web editor for In These Times magazine, and has been a guest now 2 or 3 times on the Valley Labor Report.
The biggest distinction.
Of obviously. I mean, that's going to be the first thing she lists on her CV, I'm sure, if she ever tries to get into a different job. Sarah, welcome back to the program. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yep. And so your latest piece or actually, I don't know, you may have published something in between when you published this piece a couple of weeks ago and now, but you published a piece about the UAW's attempt to get Stellantis to reopen the Belvidere assembly plant. And this is this is just before they were able to get it into the contract that they negotiated with Stellantis. And so now your article is focusing on how are they going to make sure that this happens, that it's not just words on a page, that Stellantis actually follows through. But before we get to that, can you just talk to us about the significance of reopening an indefinitely idled plant?
It's pretty incredible. And, when I asked labor scholar Barry Eadlin if it was unprecedented, he said it's at least unprecedented for over many decades. I heard about the Belvidere assembly plant closing a lot during the UAW stand-up strike. I went down to a practice ticket at the Chicago assembly plant, which is a Ford facility. And when people talked about Belvidere plant shutting down, it really became a symbol of corporate greed and callousness and willingness to just walk away from communities that have been giving, in this case, Stellantis profits for many, many decades. So the idea then that as a result of the strike, the plant would reopen was just stunning. When I heard that, I was like, wow, that is huge news for this town of 25,000 that's been really devastated by the closure. Grocery stores near the plant have already closed. Restaurants have gone out of business. There are a lot of workers there who have kids in the local school system who may have relocated for those jobs or who have been in the community for a long time. And they were looking at the real possibility of being uprooted. And then all of a sudden they're not anymore. Or at least hopefully they're not anymore. And, one thing that really interested me about this story is that a common anti-union trope says that you better not unionize your plant because it'll get shut down. And this cuts against that. And this says, actually, a strike succeeded in reopening an idled plant, which is almost unheard of.
Right. And I have been, I've been using that a lot. One of the stations that we're on is a conservative radio station, and so I go on weekly on the morning radio hosts program, and that's something that he's constant. Anytime the UAW comes up, he's like, "Isn't that going to make it?" The reason that Alabama has gotten all of these auto jobs is because of right to work, no unions and stuff. So isn't there a risk that all of these auto jobs are going to leave if the UAW comes in, right? Third partying the union comes in as opposed to the workers here organizing with the UAW. And so that has been actually incredibly beneficial for for me as I'm going on the radio trying to make the case for this, because obviously we know that it doesn't have to be that way, but it has been that way for decades. And so the fact that they were actually able to materially reverse this for the first time, like you said, that Eidlin said, in at least decades, is huge, and is huge for, and I think will be huge for their campaign to organize the non-union sector.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what a talking point, when you're speaking with skeptical workers or workers who may not be familiar with unions, what an anecdote to be able to share. I do want to say that when I got to Belvidere to report this story, the tone I was met with from workers was one of excitement and optimism, but tempered with caution and sometimes outright uneasiness. There was a strong awareness that there's a difference between winning something on paper in a contract and actually making it happen. And I did hear complaints from some workers in Belvidere who said that the company has not been as forthright as they would have liked in terms of transparency around when all the workers are going to come back, what exactly is the timetable, when exactly can we expect X number of jobs. At the time, around 165 workers had been called back to sort of do parts distribution work. The local president, Matt Franson, said that number was 180. The company said it was 165. But one of the workers that I profiled still hadn't at the time been called back yet. I haven't checked in with him. There's a chance that by now he has. But he was very eager to get back to work and just sort of, I think people have reason to be hopeful and reason to be optimistic, but are also very, very cautious. And I do want to point out that there are a few provisions that are cause for optimism. So one is that the new Stellantis contract achieved through the stand-up strike, it does say that workers have the right to strike over plant closures and product and things like that, which means that if the company were to not follow through on its commitments laid out in the contract, that it could potentially have a strike on its hands, and workers are allowed to strike the entire company over those things. So that's one thing that bodes well. Another thing that bodes well is that the company, at least right now, is on the hook to pay sub-pay to a certain amount of workers, equaling 74% of their former pay at 40 hours a week. So, it's a good sign that the company is still tethered to at least some of those workers. And then I just want to point out the commitments laid out in the contract. It's not just a reversal of the idling of the Belvidere assembly plant. They've also committed to relocating an electric vehicle facility in Belvidere, and then also a big parts distribution hub. I will say that the parts distribution hub is going to consolidate potentially other nearby hubs, so it is possible that people in other communities may lose their positions or look at having to transfer. And that was one thing that workers pointed out as well. So this is all to say that, this is not perfect. What's ever perfect? And also, it's not really a done deal. Matt Franson, the president of the local, told me, we are so excited, but we'll believe it when we start seeing the dirt being moved and the concrete being poured. And I think that really sums up the tone that I was met with when I went to Belvidere.
The thing that in your article that gave me the most optimism was Stellantis being on the hook for that subpay of 74% of their wages. How is it that what are the qualifications for that?
So my understanding, I took a note on these numbers because I didn't want to be inaccurate. So at the time I reported this, The local president told me that 815 members of the local are receiving sub pay, and are expected to get placed into jobs eventually, on top of what he said were 180 who are currently back to work in parts distribution. However, that is less than the total number of people who were put out of work. So when the company idled in February 2023, this put 1,350 workers out of work. But the actual number who have been put out of work since cuts first began is much, much greater. And a lot of those workers have transferred, have moved on. So sub pay isn't necessarily going to every single worker impacted, but it is a big chunk of the local.
Right.
And
So
it is being, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, so is the criteria something like, you haven't transferred, and that makes sense that you're not gonna give sub pay to somebody who's working for your company in another location. They have their full pay. That makes some amount of sense. Or maybe they have permanently moved on and they don't have intentions of returning. But if people are still in Belvidere, they haven't gotten another permanent occupation, then they get sub pay. Is it something like that?
I think it's something like that, but I don't want to be inaccurate, and I don't the exact criteria are complex, so I don't know exactly what the full parameters are.
Yeah, well, I mean, having 830 people, almost 1,000 people that you're paying to do nothing, right? I mean, that's a pretty big incentive to try to move some dirt and get them doing something, right? I mean, you're paying them anyway. You may as well have them producing for you. I mean, that's is there any precedent for that?
So I do want to say, so JC Bankston, one of the workers that I profiled, he really wanted to underscore that workers are not living high on the hog, that the 74% is sort of needed for just basic retention, for covering groceries. He really underscored that for him, it's a pretty significant pay cut because he was working more than 40 hours a week. Right. So, and it's 74% of 40 hours. So he I think wanted to push back against this idea that workers are just doing nothing. But sub pay is definitely something. This is not the first time we've seen sub pay in a contract. I think what's exciting about this case is that the sub pay is coming from a company that has made a stated commitment in the contract to reverse the shuttering of the plant. And so that sort of act of keeping the company tethered to these workers, I think, is a cause for hope among some.
And so, I think it's entirely reasonable for especially workers that are affected by this to be optimistic, but cautiously so, right? Because this is the same company that would have, but for the UAW's contract campaign in 2023, left their community to rot. Right. I mean, so yeah. They have every reason in the world to be skeptical of this company. What sort of preparations are they making to try to make sure that they follow through?
So my understanding is that right now, a big part of it is monitoring and waiting and staying in touch with members and trying to get answers from the company, and trying to sort of track who is going back and when, and be in touch. This is a local that is active. They're still having membership meetings. They run a food pantry out of their local once a month, they distribute food to needy families once a month in connection with the local food pantry. This is an active local. My sense is that right now, what enforcing this means is sort of staying cohesive and alert. There are probably conversations happening. I can't say know 100% of the planning and organizing going into this, but I will say that there's a very healthy skepticism that gave me some reassurance that the local really, really wants to be on top of it. And, this is a lifeblood of this town. It's not like people aren't going to notice if Stellantis doesn't follow through.
Right. Right. I think that's very important in making sure that the local stays active, that the communication stays up to date, and that they continue to monitor Stellantis to make sure that they do follow through. And Stellantis has not announced a start date for preparations to begin reopening, have they?
I reached out to Stellantis for the article and asked them for a precise timetable, and all they said was, look, we're complying with the contract, and didn't offer much more than that. I do know, so like there have been some timetables laid out. So the contract says that Stellantis must reopen the Belvidere assembly plant to produce mid-sized trucks by 2027. Although the language does not actually specify how many jobs would be created. And the electric vehicle facility is a few years down the line. I think the parts distribution hub would be a little bit sooner. So we are looking at commitments that are a bit down the line. I mean, we're not talking 10 years, we're talking a few years. But nonetheless, I think it's going to take a lot of really sustained monitoring and organizing, honestly, to sort of make sure things are on track.
The other thing that gave me a lot of hope that we would be able to see this follow through is the fact that the UAW was able to secure a right to strike the whole company over investment decisions and outsourcing, job placements, stuff like that. Was that a discussion as you're talking to these folks about, what are your thoughts about Stellantis' commitment here? Was there any explicit discussion of we're prepared to strike nationwide if they don't follow through with their commitment to this community?
As far as what I came across, that's not the language that people were using right now in this moment. But I do think there's an undercurrent of that threat. I mean, there has to be. Workers already showed themselves willing to walk out and participate in a stand-up strike strategy, which was kind of a series of rolling strikes that caught employers by surprise. They were surprise announcements. You didn't know where UAW was going to strike next. And we saw a lot of enthusiasm and excitement around that and a lot of participation. So I think the fact that there's been a strike so recently really makes it so that contract language is not theoretical and, comes with a real threat.
Right. Is there anything else that you think is important for folks to understand about this situation in Belvidere, or maybe even broadening out the state of the UAW's relationship with the Big Three and their campaign to organize the non-union sector, and how this plays into it?
Well, there's actually one thing I wanted to highlight about the Belvidere situation, which is that the UAW has framed the commitment to create an electric vehicle plant as part of a just transition. The idea of a just transition is that, in light of the climate crisis, there is a need to transition away from fossil fuels. And a lot of people in labor and also in the climate movement have been pressing that if that's going to happen, we need to make sure that workers are taken care of, that no workers are left behind, that they are put in jobs that are dignified union jobs, and that it does not become a race to the bottom, which I think is a big concern among UAW. When you look at the burgeoning, growing electric vehicle industry in the United States, there's a lot of concern about non-union jobs, about jobs with really poor conditions. And so in a highlighter that summarizes the wins in the Stellantis contract, UAW describes the Belvidere assembly plant as part of a just transition. I think it said something like Belvidere was flat on its back and now it's getting this new facility. And I know that Shawn Fain, the president of UAW, who won as a reform challenger, has used the language of a just transition. And this has been a real opening with climate activists. So there are groups like the Labor Network for Sustainability that really, really mobilize climate activists to show up for the stand-up strike. And they came to picket lines. They, flyered a gathering of automakers in Detroit. And so we're seeing, some interesting opening of possible collaboration between different sectors of the movement that I think are exciting and interesting. And when you talk about UAW's push to organize the unorganized, you can't really talk about that without talking about the electric vehicle sector, because it's highly ununionized, and there's just a lot of potential for workers to really be in the driver's seat of what a shift away from fossil fuels means for the people doing the labor.
Right. I think that's very important because, as we've been hearing talk about a transition to electric vehicles, it has aroused a skepticism from a lot of folks about, because they have seen the state of the transition so far, right? And so they've got every reason to be skeptical. How is it being received, that language of a just transition and the UAW taking a more active role in the transition to electric vehicles and being more vocal about the need for this, but with the very strong caveat that it needs to be good paying union jobs? How is that being received by the membership?
I asked that question to Matt Franzen, the president of the local in Belvidere, and he basically said something like, look, workers are not necessarily giddy about the transition to electric vehicles, but they understand that having this plant in their town could really help their town. And J.C. Bankston, the worker who I interviewed, he was pretty open. And sorry, when I talk about the local, I'm talking about UAW 1268. That's the local in Belvidere. But J.C. Bankston was like, yeah, if this change is going to happen, let's just make sure that it's not a race to the bottom. I think the broader question of how membership overall feels about electric vehicles is a complex one and would probably take some polling or data that I don't have. I will say that there's been a false narrative put out there by auto companies, actually, that workers and unions are opposed to electric vehicles. And it was actually put out aggressively during the strike, people trying to make the argument that the strike is going to actually hurt the transition to electric vehicles, even though if you listen to what Shawn Fain's administration was saying, that's not at all what they were saying. They didn't say anything in opposition to electric vehicles. It was just purely this argument that we have to prevent a race to the bottom in terms of labor standards.
Right. That's it. I was actually shocked how much I saw that, especially in some of the mainstream, maybe like MSNBC type places.
It's a perfect talking point to try to peel away support among the sort of Biden liberals, people who are invested in climate mitigation, and telling them oh, workers going on strike is going to threaten climate mitigation is the perfect talking point for automakers.
Right.
And I really appreciate that you brought up that there has been some opening in terms of collaboration between environmental justice activists and labor activists and uniting around what a just transition looks like and how that includes good union jobs. And I think the more we collaborate, the more we can dispel that kind of narrative.
Yeah, and I mean, there were plenty of climate activists who were like, all right, this is our moment. If we want to build trust and solidarity, with unions and let them know that we're for real and that we really are going to fight for the livelihoods and well-being of workers. Now is our chance. There were people who took it really seriously. There were pretty broad coalitions of climate groups who demonstrated solidarity, including going out to picket lines.
Right. All right. Sarah Lazare, editor of Workday Magazine. Really appreciate your time. Check out our work in Workday Magazine and in these times. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Oh, and sorry, could I just say, I want to give credit where it's due. So this Belvidere article, it was a collaboration. It was co-published with Workday Magazine, In These Times, and Labor Notes. So I just want to give shout out to all those other publications too.
Absolutely. I'll completely endorse that. Labor Notes, In These Times, Workday Magazine. Check them all out. Subscribe to all of them if you haven't yet. It's very good. All very good stuff. So make sure that you're following all of their work. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Tom from the Trillbilly Workers Party is going to be joining us here in 5 to 10 minutes. He's not on the Zoom right now, right?
No.
Okay, yeah. I didn't think he was. So 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. I think that, I mean, like I said, this reopening of the Belvidere plant is really, really important, and has been, something that I have leaned on a lot as I'm trying to do, media work in Alabama, trying to dispel some of this stuff that, if workers are paid well, if workers have any modicum of control over the place where they spend the majority of their waking lives, then the companies will necessarily have to move. Like they have to. That's just a law of economics. And even without that anecdote, obviously, we know that it's not. We know that it doesn't have to be that way. But having that anecdote there from so recent has been extremely beneficial for me because, what do you say to that? There's, you're saying this hypothetically, it means that jobs will go away. Well, I'm saying that literally, materially, the union was able to create jobs, actually. It wasn't a job killer. It was literally a job creator.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's been very beneficial, and I think it's very good, and I think it bodes well for the health of the UAW, the health of the labor movement, and the success of this campaign to organize the non-union sector, particularly in the South, where that argument does have maybe even more weight than it would elsewhere, because I do think that people are aware of, the fact that companies did move here to to get away from unions, right? This was a very big, it was a big reason that they came from the North and the Midwest, is to try to get away from unions, try to pay people less, try to have more control over their employees. And so if you're a worker in that situation, you're like, well, if I do the same thing that other people have before, then these jobs will leave. And it doesn't have to be that way. And in fact, the UAW is leading the way in making sure that it's not that way in the future.
Right, absolutely.
So,
and I do think we have Tom on the line.
Fantastic. All right. Tom Sexton is a co-host of the Trillbilly Workers Party podcast. You can find them at the Trillbillies. They have, hundreds of thousands of people listening to them as a podcast, which is very. I'm interested in the, Tom's take on the podcast industry generally, because it does seem like podcasts as a genre are pretty kind of secluded from the rest of the media narrative and the discourse or whatever. But huge amounts of people listen to podcasts and the Trillbillies specifically. And it's interesting that their place in the discourse is maybe not reflective of that. So anyway, Tom Sexton, Trillbilly Workers Party, thank you for taking the time to join us to celebrate our Kentucky debut on 88.7 FM WMMT in Whitesburg.
Y'all picked the hip hop giant in the mountains.
That's right.
To make your debut on. What's
So,
going on, fellas? Been a minute.
It has been a minute. It has. Appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. So, what is that like being, on a podcast where, like hundreds of thousands of folks listen to y'all, and I don't think that y'all really get kind of the attention or relevance in a lot of the discourse that people of that get similar numbers in like some of the mainstream media that they get. What do you think the reason for that is?
It's probably best that way, honestly. No, I don't know. I mean, it's not something that I've really thought about, to be perfectly honest with you. With to your question on the whole podcast industry writ large, it's like I live in fear of it going the way of the blog and having to get honest work again. Because I'm not filled with work. So
you're not excited to sell your labor?
Yeah, excited. Yeah, to get back out there and actually do. Well, I mean, I say that like I don't have a day job, but it's podcast thing has been a nice supplement to that, and you don't have to worry so much. But I think when you've been in positions like we've all been in, like you're always that nagging feeling of like, well, any day now, pal, the hammer's going to drop on you. So,
right.
But yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's one of those things. It's almost like reflective of the bourbon industry, where you wait for the bubble to pop a little bit, and then it just never does, and it just keeps getting more and more.
Yeah, we're big bourbon fans here. So that's a good.
We do bourbon and podcast on the VLR.
There you go. So speaking of selling your labor to capitalists, there's this video going around of this really, really young kid working at Burger King. This was a couple of weeks back, and the right wing and there's been this push to make it easier for capitalists to have children work for them across the country, particularly in the South. And so
was it like there's like 13-year-olds working at like Nissan or something down y'all's way?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was for Hyundai, actually. It was
Hyundai,
people as young as 13, dozens of children working at a Hyundai plant here in Alabama. And in fact, just last week, it was revealed that back in what was it, August, Adam, a 15-year-old died on his first day on the job at a roofing company.
And Alabama's politicians see that and are like, well, the only problem is that's illegal right now. We need to make that legal so we can have more of that.
Yeah, they look at that as like a character building thing for everybody that remains that's 14 years old and trying to make. I mean, I'm sure we've all did that. I mean, hell, I was hanging drywall when I was, not much older than that, I guess.
Right.
So,
well, that was actually one of down in Florida. They have one of these bills, and that was one of the arguments of the author of the bill. They were like, I broke child labor laws when I was 12 and 13, and I've got a company where children have worked for me, and so people who are gonna break the law are going to do this anyway, so we may as well legalize it, right?
Might as well get some mileage out of this child suffering.
I mean, just unleash it, right? Unleash capitalism, and we'll have a whole lot of everybody will benefit if this arrangement is more legal than it is today.
Well, I would caution everybody and say this: my character did not benefit one single smidge from hanging drywall at 14 and roofing at 15 and everything else.
Right.
So.
Well,
we just put that to bed.
Yeah, well, and that's
I thought maybe that was the reason behind the success, right? You were just busting your ass as a middle schooler, and it's all come off. It's all paid off now.
That's
right. You
didn't
learn your work ethic from that, and it wasn't like just a incredibly formative time in your life.
I tell you, the one thing I did get out of it is the camaraderie. I mean, you guys talk about this, we talk about this, but like, there's a few things like that sort of job site camaraderie, and I think it puts you ahead of the curve socially. I think it puts you ahead of the curve in terms of how to interact with people and interface with the world every day. But that's the real benefit. There's no like sort of hard lessons to be learned by breaking your body down.
Right. and a lot of the things that they say that you can learn on the job is like things that you can also learn in school. One of the things that they said in some of these conservative podcasts was, you learn how to punch a clock, and it's like, you get to school at the same time every day. Like, right. you have to catch the bus at the same time. Like, what do you mean you learn how to punch a clock? Like, what are you talking about?
Well, that's giving the whole game away in a way, right? It's like what they really want to do is just make sure they max extract everything they can out of us so that somebody else can, make a fortune while we make a pittance. And
and so
rinse, wash, repeat.
Matt Walsh is one of the people who inserted himself into this conversation. Aren't you a big fan of Matt Walsh?
Yeah, he's good at inserting himself in conversations. That's about it.
So he said, I had my first job when I was 14. I was able to do something productive, earn a bit of money, and learn some basic skills. I cannot understand why people are opposed to this. It's not like we're sending kids down into the mines. What is the problem exactly? And that's actually...
Yet.
Yeah. He's clearly not following politics closely enough because an Indiana Republican literally introduced a law to legally send 14-year-olds into the mines.
Oh my god!
It's actually, it's funny because that's the most, around any conversation about workplace protections, unions, child labor, the quintessential bad workplace is the mines. Right? Oh, unions. Yeah. You don't need a union here in this auto manufacturing facility. We're not a coal mine. You don't. Children can work here in this. This service industry. It's not a coal mine, right? It's literally the epitome of bad working conditions. This is the place where you need to be most protected, and you need a union, and you need labor laws, and all of this. And he went to it because of that, because this was the most extreme thing that he could think of. He can't think of anything more extreme than sending 14-year-olds into the coal mines, and Republicans are trying to do that.
Yeah. Which is only 3 feet away from sending them to war. You know what I mean? Like the ultimate character building exercise.
Right.
Right. Well, I mean, this wait till. If not 2024, maybe by 2028, we'll reduce the draft age to 14 for more of that character building. I think that's where you're wrong, Jacob, because like you said, the coal mine is the most extreme. That means the most extreme character building.
Right. You're gonna get the most character from the coal
more
mine.
Underground you go, the more your character grows.
Yeah, who among you striving to be the most pious? We're going to send you underground.
You said that maybe we should just continue this to the next logical step and have children being drafted at earlier ages. Terrence was talking about the character benefit that his veteran friends have received from their service. Just on was it on the last episode or maybe the one before that?
Oh yeah.
And it was all extremely beneficial, like zero downsides for them.
Yeah. It shook out perfectly well for all of them, you know. So
there's, I think, one that he roomed with, and said that he would find him up at all hours of the night, like hallucinating or I don't know. It was, obviously not good. It was not a good thing. So,
no.
You know, there are Republicans that want to send people into the coal mines. But the other part of this is that, you know, what's the big deal with people working at you know, Good Burger when they're, you know, teenagers? And it's like, well, they can. They can, in every state in the country, actually, teenagers are allowed to work in restaurants and service industry and Trader Joe's. It's just that they can't do it for more than like 4 hours on a school day and 8 hours on the weekend or during the summer. And that's like really basically it. You can't work them too late, you can't work them too much, and you can't work them too many days in a row. And so actually, you know, there's not a problem as far as as far as that goes. It's all legal. And the problem is that they're trying to make it more easy for capitalists to do this. And one of the thing that's happening in Alabama is actually we have a requirement for 14 and 15-year-olds that a school sign off, their school sign off, or the educational institution, if they're homeschooled, you know, their parents. But if they're in the public education system, the school has to say this 14-year-old, you know, is doing academically well enough that they can go work. And the bill in Alabama is to get rid of that requirement. Schools can't say no to their children working. And so it's explicitly to allow, you know, 14-year-olds who are failing school to go and work. It's just.
Did y'all have that? Like, I would always hear from time to time growing up, for example, so-and-so like dropped out of school at 14 to go work on the farm or something like that. Like, I would hear stories and I never really knew what that meant, except that like this kid I'd went to school with my whole life, I just never saw him again.
Right.
No, or not in that context anyway, you know.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's kind of a weird thing that goes on. It's like, oh yeah, in some places, it's kind of the same thing like how some kids can get like a farm driver's license when they're like 13 or 14 or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Some states, I'm sure that's not everywhere.
Yeah, and it's just wild that they see that and like, we need more of that. Just more of that.
Yeah.
You know, no need to go to school. Just go straight to the workforce. Just go straight to the workforce. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the tight labor market that we have right now, and the workers that are organizing everywhere. I'm sure it's just a pure coincidence they want to insert more children there.
Yeah.
And so this video was going around, and it got this it got the discourse going, and the conservatives were very dismayed by people being, you know, kind of perturbed by an extremely young kid working at Burger King. You know, like the kid looked like, I mean, maybe even 11 or 12. Surely he was at least 13 or 14, but, you know, it was a very young looking kid. And so that's just kind of off-putting, you know, as an American, you know, I go to Burger King. It's like, I want to be, you know, I want to see people that look like they can drive.
Yeah, right.
So, and so they were very unhappy with the reaction to this video. And Brett Cooper is one of the people at the Daily Wire. She was one of them. Was like, oh, this is crazy. You know, I can't believe the reaction. This is all I see is a kid having fun. You know, we blurred his face because he's under 18, but I promise you, under that, he's smiling and he's incredibly.
All I
happy.
see is a kid having it his way.
Yeah, exactly. But there was some positive news that she shared during this segment that she had about child labor. So let's play this, and Terrence, I'm interested in your thoughts on her positive news.
But guys, it's not all doom and gloom. We actually do have a positive update because in 2023, the number of teens working reached a 14-year high. It had the biggest increase literally since the 90s.
So there you go, 14-year high in children working. Good news?
I wouldn't term that a positive trend. But yeah,
we're trying to get back to the Gilded Age, right?
Yeah.
We've got the Gilded Age inequality. We've got the robber barons like Elon Musk. Like, we need Musk to start wearing a top hat. and like
Right,
a
that's
monocle.
right.
You know, the old school capitalist robber barons, and just really dress the part. Put the kids back in the coal mines, and it'll be 1880s all over again.
That's exactly right. You know, something I'm doing right now. I'm taking singing lessons. I'm trying to start playing the piano again and different things like that. I grew up in church doing that. I wish like now as an older man that like I would have really dialed in when my brain was spongy. You know what I mean? Because like things are way harder now, and it's like we should be giving kids the freedom to be spongy and learn things and languages and skills, you know, both creative and non-creative and all these things. And instead, like, you know, we're paying them peanuts to like make a fortune for like the local oligarch that owns the Burger King franchise. It's just really, I don't know, it's disheartening, you know? And again, I'm not besmirching hard work or anything like that at all, but, it's just that it's just a little sad, and it's always kids that you know, kids that live in certain neighborhoods don't have to go work at Burger King.
Right.
You
I was going to
the
say
day
that.
they turn 13, you know.
Yeah, my wife teaches at a very rural school, and it's no surprise it's the poor kids that are tired every day because they were working so much, right? It's not the affluent kids, not that there's many at that school, but yeah, the well-off middle-class kids typically aren't the ones who are working late at night, you know, as teenagers. It's the kids who have to, right? They're paying part of the light bill for mama, you know, if there's a mama at home, right? And so, yeah, it's definitely a distinction between who is actually impacted here. But you said something about learning to sing and getting back into that kind of stuff, and I think that's pretty cool and interesting. And you mentioned language, and that you know, definitely reminds me, like they always say the easiest time to learn a language is when you're really young. And so, yeah, like the sponginess aspect of their brains, like what are they picking up when they could be picking up so many different things? It's, you know, how to cook French fries.
Right.
It's, you know, it's just not the kind of intellectual development one would want for our nation's young people, you know, but hey, it's no big deal. It's just the future.
Well, and Brett actually responded to that almost exactly in response to Florida's attempt to loosen child labor laws, and so she explains actually what Florida's bill would do, and then goes on to say, you know, this is fine, and you're going to have plenty of time to do all of that other, you know, frilly stuff. So let's listen to her explain what's going on in Florida.
Unfortunately, I don't know if Tom's going to be able to hear the clip. Did you hear the first clip, Tom? Did it?
No, I improvised that. I have to say.
No,
no.
Yeah, I thought there might be something off there. So tell me, Jacob, if you want to go forward with it. It's up to you, brother. But you know,
well, I guess not.
I see something about fighting alligators. So
yeah, well, so
now that does intrigue me. I don't know. I don't know what this conservative.
About, if there's alligator fighting involved, let's carry on.
Well, yeah. So what she says is she explains the law, which would allow. You know, currently, the law in Florida is that you cannot work children too many days in a row. And so one of the things that the law does is it allows you to work children 6 days in a row. And you also can't work children more than 4.5 hours in a school day. And so
what's that based on? Is that like how long, like God rested on the seventh day?
I guess.
I was thinking that same thing.
He only worked 4.5 hours a day creating the heavens and the earth, though.
No, that's what it was before. That's what it was before. So now they want to extend the day to 8 hours. So you can work a kid 6 days a week, 8 hours a day during the school year. And
so they go to school for 7-8 hours a day and then go work a full-time job, essentially.
48 hours a week. And she says, after explaining this, it's not like they're sending them to go fight alligators in the swamp. That's what you would think they're making them do. And it's obviously not what they're making them do, Brett Cooper says, incredulously.
Oh, my God, dude.
So, yeah.
It's so bad.
You know,
it's pretty bad.
a 48-hour work week would be a lot harder if you were fighting alligators, but it kind of sucks no matter what job you have. Like 48 hours, it's not cool.
Yeah, I'm almost 30 and I don't want to work a 48-hour work week. That sucks. I've done it before and I hate it. It sucks. I wouldn't want to do that while I'm going to school full time.
I like how much these people don't have their finger on the pulse. Like the rest of the world and much of our country is like trying to dial in the work week a little bit. Like a lot of it is, we know, like even rabid capitalists know a lot of it is just like wasted productivity from their perspective.
Right.
You know, and Florida's like, nah, let's ramp it up a little bit. That's the way to fly.
Yeah. And they, another thing that she says is that one of the reasons that we should allow children to work more is that children are too illiterate today, and the public education system is failing them because they're not literate enough, and therefore maybe they'll learn to read better at work. So have we tried anything like that before? I mean, this is, this is an idea. It's a, there's like a empirical, we could theoretically test this, how do you get more literacy by education or by working? Adam, have we got any data on that? Adam's the history teacher.
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I think that we did do that at one time, and turns out it didn't help.
Really?
Turns out best way to, become more literate is to actually study literacy and read and write. And it turns out you don't learn a lot of that at the coal mine or at the Burger King. I don't remember any like grammar lessons at Wendy's. I worked at Wendy's and Sonic, at the movie theater, all that kind of stuff as a teenager. I don't remember learning much about literacy. I can't say that I did, at least.
What about you, Tom? Did you learn literacy hanging drywall?
Yeah, I was reading R.L. Stein on my little 15-minute breaks that I get, it's just ridiculous on its face, and it's just
yeah. So I've got a couple other stories that I wanted your thoughts on. We're talking about children, and Alabama's Supreme Court has recently declared that embryos in IVF clinics are people as it relates to Alabama state law. And so therefore a wrongful death lawsuit, it can move forward against an IVF clinic because they spilled some of the frozen embryos.
I'll keep my initial reaction WMMT friendly.
Well, we're not live on WMMT, so we will be able to censor it if necessary.
Oh, okay, that's good. I've been sitting here wondering, like, did I let something fly just reflexively?
No, we are not live. We are. This is going to be sent to them to play later in the week, so we'll be able to clean up.
Okay. Yeah, this is just. I mean, like, what's a life, what's not a life is just such a race to the bottom always. Like,
right.
It's like half the time I don't like nobody's engaging in that in the culture wars in good faith. So it's like not even worth like talking about in some ways. But it is just ridiculous that like there's some new gamete or organism that we technically are or is a part of us before we're actually fully formed that that constitutes life now.
Well, the thing that I found most interesting about it is that it just seems like they're pulling the trigger on this way too quick, because I mean it hasn't been but just a month or two ago that I heard from Republicans talking about Roe and abortion and all of this, because that's actually been something that people respond to in the context of the abortion conversation. Like, if you take this to its logical conclusion, they're going to outlaw IVF, and they're going to say that frozen embryos are people, and therefore we're trampling on their human rights or whatever, the human rights of these frozen embryos and eggs and stuff. And Republicans would turn around and say, that's crazy. We just want to, we would never do that. And it just seems like it's a little early for the Alabama Supreme Court to be like pulling this trigger.
Yeah, it seems even for y'all standards, it seems a little heavy-handed.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they won't let you kill an embryo, just grown-ups.
Right.
Just grown-ups.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, maybe 14 and 15-year-olds on the job.
But only if you're a boss. Only if you're a
Yeah,
boss.
right.
You can't,
Yeah,
you
that's
can't
right.
do it if you're
That's
anybody else. But if you're a boss, you can get away with it. The employer that was responsible for the death of that 15-year-old, all he got was fines, right? And this was a person who had been fined for safety issues in 2017, 2019, and 2021, right? So this is not a person that is new to OSHA. And still, even after all of that, all those previous fines, all he got for being responsible for the death of this kid was another fine. It's bizarre.
It's beyond parody, man. It's like, if I don't see how that's meaningfully different than like driving drunk and killing somebody. Like that wasn't obviously your intent, but
right.
You created the conditions for something like that to happen. So, what's the.
No, I think that's
not
a really good
not to be
parallel.
punitive or get into that, but I'm just saying, like,
if we've got the prisons already,
just empty them and replace them with bosses, is what you're
That's
saying.
right.
I guess.
That's right.
Just a jail full of bosses. Yeah, I could get down for that.
And so the last story, very, very relevant to the conversation, if not as timely, because y'all mentioned that the subtext of this is that these people who are pushing these child labor bills, it's not actually their children that are going to be affected by this. It's not the child of the state senator introducing this bill in Florida is not going to be working 48 hours a week while they're in school. Obviously, they're going to be going to some whatever private religious school, then doing whatever extracurriculars they want to outside of school,
interning with some freak,
with some ghoul, vampire lizard person, and getting Harvard paid for by the donations that their parents make. So the people that are going to be affected by this are like some white folks in trailer parks and immigrants, right? And by and large, undocumented immigrants. And there's this clip that's been going around of Milton Friedman talking about just saying the subtext out loud. He says in the clip something like, illegal immigration is great for the immigrants and for the business owner and for the economy, but only so far as it's illegal. And he talks like that. So far as it's the weird mid-Atlantic accent, whatever it is. And he says that literally, a quote. It's only good so far as it's illegal. If it's legal, it's no good. And he says because these people, they don't have access to the benefits that the taxes that they pay for. They don't have the right to vote or anything like that. And so all of this, it's a good arrangement for everybody. They have a better job than they would have in their home country. The boss gets cheap labor. The consumer gets cheap goods, and the welfare state is not dependent on these people, and we're not politically accountable to them. And so it's all great, but only as long as it's illegal.
Something I can appreciate about that mentality in a different context, but in this one, I'm selling.
Right. Yeah, it's that is what they're asking for, is this permanent underclass of folks that can be hyper exploited, right? And because if you are here illegally, Are you going to unionize, right? Are you going to speak up when the boss steals your wages or sexually harasses you or does any of the other crazy things that happen to people at work? So it's, yeah, I mean, that's kind of just laying it out there, I guess, a little more honest than some folks.
Yeah, well,
Tom, before we let you go, I wanted to just get some insight on labor organizing in Kentucky. Is there anything cool happening in Kentucky that we need to know about?
Oh, I mean, labor organizing or, politically. We've been talking about,
what's going on up there.
Yeah,
we know about Alabama.
Right.
But I know a little bit about Mississippi, but not much about Kentucky, honestly. I've just driven through there to go to Chicago for labor notes. That's my Kentucky experience.
Well, you got to stop in next time. Well, I mean, the one thing I would mention just personally is several years ago, Terrence and I were involved in this fight to stop this federal prison that's been proposed to be built in Letcher County, where we're from, and that has since we were successful the first time, but it's since come back up under the Biden administration. Who'd have thunk it?
Imagine that.
And so the last thing I heard about this, and for those that aren't familiar, one of only at the time it was the only federal prison scheduled to be built in their pipeline. Now I think there's a second one, maybe slated to be built in Kansas, I think. But yeah, so Hal Rogers, who is our congressman in Kentucky's 5th congressional district, has is on his way out. And so, like, even a lot of well-meaning Democrats, when we've said, like, what are you going to do to try to challenge this? They're like, well, Hal's old. He's been around. We're going to give him his prison. It's almost like, when you would work for the factory and they'd give you like a gold Elgin watch on your last day or something like that. Instead, he gets to build, federal prison that's going to be, this, $500 million monument to human suffering and in a stone's throw away from one of the only old growth forests left in this country. So it's just a whole bad deal from start to finish. So, but there's a good group of folks, from all different, ages and backgrounds and everything that are working on that. So I just want to name that. And, if you're looking to, wondering what you can do about that, just DM me or the Trillbillies account or whatever, wherever we're at, and plug you in.
All right. Tom Sexton, Trillbilly Workers Party. How'd you come out with a name?
It's kind of dumb.
Nah. Couldn't have been.
It was kind of a nod to, Southern rap and UGK and all these people we grew up listening to and things.
Are you a 3-6 Mafia
I was
fan?
born in Texas. Oh, yeah, for sure. In fact,
Pat?
I had the privilege of becoming friends with the late great Gangsta Boo before she passed, which was
wow, that's
one of the great thrills of my life. Yeah,
hell yeah, there you go. Yeah, that's really cool. Definitely listened to a lot of the underground Memphis rap as a teenager. Can't listen to Project Pat without thinking of Wild Times and Younger Days, and that's really cool to have gotten to know Gangsta Boo and get to know her. Put that on your resume.
All right. Tom Sexton.
Yeah, I appreciate you, fellas. Yeah, we'll have to get together on our show again sometime. Been too long.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Anytime, and we'll hit you up if we're ever in Kentucky.
Yep. Sounds good. Y'all be good.
Appreciate you.
There we go, folks. Kentucky debut of the Valley Labor Report. I guess now we're, the Valley is a generic enough kind of name that it's not going to be out of place in a lot of places. But in Kentucky, we're on the mountain. Actually,
that's true.
The opposite of the Valley. We're the mountain.
Right. Yeah, so. and I've put out feelers for West Virginia. we are looking to expand to other radio stations. So if anyone's listening and you've got connections to a radio station or, know anyone who works at a radio station, anything like that, public radio, college radio, commercial talk radio, whatever the situation may be, we'd love to expand and get into some other areas. We'd love to grow across Alabama, but also across the South. I guess I'm not opposed to going outside the South, honestly. Yeah. If some Yankee brother or sister out there really wants to put us on the air somewhere, we're down to do that. I don't know, if they would dig it, but if you do, happy to work with you. So, yeah, get us on the air wherever you can. Really would appreciate that, and happy to be on the air in Kentucky. Lots of great labor history in Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely. As we're rounding out, I wanted to share with people just a couple of stats from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign's School of Labor and Employment Relations, the ILR school.
Really, I thought that was at Cornell. Am I wrong about? I guess. It's
this report was done in cooperation with Cornell's ILR and Illinois School of Labor. Thank you for that.
Gotcha.
I was not super clear on that. Okay, yeah. So it's Cornell's ILR. What does ILR stand for? Cornell International Labor Relations.
I think it's Industrial Labor Relations. And I know they've got this great tracker, the ILR tracker, where you can go, any time of the year and see what's happening in terms of strike activity. It's a really cool tool.
Yes. So they created their report for labor work stoppages in 2023. And a couple of cool numbers that I wanted to share. The number of work stoppages involving demands for a first contract more than doubled from 36 in 2022 to 74 in 2023. In 2023, approximately 539,000 workers were involved in 470 work stoppages, 466 strikes, and 4 lockouts, totaling 24,870,000 some odd strike days. The number of work stoppages each month stayed relatively consistent before increasing considerably between August and November. That's the UAW probably. The number of workers on strike each month spiked between July and November, the UAW, and also, I guess, the actors. In comparison to 2022, there were 37 more work stoppages with about 315,000 more workers on the picket line. Almost 4/5 of work stoppages this year involved unionized workers, 78%, while just over a fifth of all work stoppages were led by non-union workers, 22%. Unionized workers comprised the largest portion of workers involved in work stoppages and strike days, accounting for 97% of the number of workers involved in work stoppages and 99.7% of strike days, respectively. So that number is really important because while it is true that you have a lot of these same rights if you're not unionized, being in a union makes it a lot easier to execute that. You do have a little bit more protections, and you're part of, generally you're going to be part of a larger labor union that has more resources that can support you. So it makes a lot of sense that the vast majority of workers who went on strike were a union, and in fact, 97% of the workers who went on strike were in unions. So
I think that is an important distinction, and it's worth pulling out, in my opinion, that if you're going to do a strike, a collective action like that, you should have some collective organization. Whether you've been recognized officially as a union or not may be a different story, but you need some sort of collective organizing to be able to pull off a strike, right? Certainly in a successful way. That's not to say that spontaneous things don't happen, but to your point, yes, legally you could go on strike as a non-union worker, and you have that right, and exercise it by all means if you can. But it's typically probably going to be more effective if you have organized yourself into a union. Like you said, if you're affiliated with a larger union, you can have resources and backup, and that is very effective and helpful in terms of winning a strike or any sort of real, collective action taking place. So and it's interesting to see, we've had a growth in independent unions and new unions lately. There are different types of union organizing that's happening. For example, the United Campus Workers, I want to shout them out. I know they've been doing work across college campuses in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, other places. And so, unions can look different depending on where you're at. They can be organized differently. But, to be able to pull off collective action, you do need some sort of collective organizing structures, ideally, for it to be sustainable. But really appreciate Cornell putting out this report. And it's interesting to see the rise. I think, like you said, the actors strike, the UAW strike, certainly bumped those numbers up quite a bit. But, we are in year 2, year 3 of talking about Striketober and strike summers and that kind of thing. So it does seem like, a couple, 2 to 3 years of sustained, activity is a trend, I think.
Right.
Now, whether it will last, I think is a good question. There are some really, I think big threats facing the labor movement. The Supreme Court case that we referenced earlier by Amazon, Trader Joe's, and SpaceX, that is really, really dangerous to the labor movement.
Right.
Not to get too off topic here, but that really has been on my mind a lot lately, because we all know the makeup of the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
It is, a far right body of judges, or at least the overwhelming majority, and they have been extremely aligned with business. If you look at the justices on that Supreme Court. So what this lawsuit is trying to do is more or less rule the current labor law regime as unconstitutional and to gut the NLRB. And, that really threatens to reverse us back into a, pre-1934, 35 situation in terms of labor rights and labor law. And we all have to be thinking as a movement, what are we going to do if that happens?
Right.
What are we going to do if the Supreme Court comes out and tosses the NLRB and our rights to organize, our rights to strike, our rights to collective bargaining, our rights to union recognition, if all of that is shredded by the Supreme Court, what do we do next? It's not that it's over by any means, right? Because workers were organizing well before the NLRA, and workers will always organize as long as there are workers. I mean, workers organized building the Pharaoh's pyramids, right? That was our first recorded strike that we know about. So workers are always going to organize no matter how difficult the situation, no matter what the laws say. But the laws obviously make a big difference. We know how broken labor law is already in this country, particularly since Taft-Hartley was passed in 1947, and in just the declines over time since then. But this really threatens to put us even further back. And that's a big concern that I have. And I think, I hope that the leaders of our labor movement, as well as our rank and file members, are all watching that and preparing, because, there has to be a response. And there has to be a strategic plan to move forward if we do lose those rights. How do we proceed? So we'll see what happens with that. And I think also Trump, the potential of Trump winning in November certainly poses a threat. We have not been shy on this show of our criticism of Joe Biden. And I live in Alabama, so my vote will not matter in November. So I'm not putting a whole lot of energy, mentally or otherwise, into it. But there's no disputing that should Trump win, things will go backwards in terms of the NLRB, the Department of Labor, the other agencies that kind of interface with our labor movement and ultimately impact working people's lives. So, those are a couple of big threats that are looming, and we've had these years of kind of labor resurgence, but those are going to be some of the biggest threats facing this more resurgent labor movement. It's going to be interesting to see how the unions respond. I have been very pleased to see a lot of unions and folks in labor speaking out for a ceasefire in Palestine, and seeing this coalition growing of unions and locals and labor councils, right, that are coming together around this. That's promising. And I think we have to have that kind of coordination to address these big issues. And, that Supreme Court case, keep your eyes on that, because I think that is a big deal. And, something that is worth mentioning maybe is that, like, the NLRA and the current labor law regime we have is sort of a compromise, right? It's a way to have some labor peace. And, that's not to say that employers are in favor of it, because they never have been, right? They would rather give up nothing. They were opposed to labor law reform in the 30s. They obviously weakened it in the 40s. They've been fighting it ever since to try to get rid of it. But it does provide labor peace to some degree, and give some advantages to the employers in that respect. Because before this, wildcat strikes were much, much more common. You had sympathy strikes, which were much, much more common, right? If basically all of your organizing is illegal, what difference does it make which laws you're breaking? At a certain point, okay, you're bucking the system. You might as well go all out. And the labor organizing dynamics prior to the National Labor Relations Act were much more violent. There was a lot more violence involved. And you had companies hiring gun thugs. You had local police departments and county sheriffs and even state militias and troops that would be used against working people trying to organize. So, I don't know. I guess just what's on my mind is it seems we're circling the drain in terms of going backwards into the Gilded Age. We already have Gilded Age levels of inequality in wealth and income. We have these unaccountable robber barons who dominate society. We are sending children back into the workforce, right? So we thought we won the child labor issue a century ago, and yet we're going backwards. And so are we going to go back to Gilded Age level union laws and labor laws? It's a valid question. And so those are just some things that I think are, kind of on my mind as I hear these numbers about the increased activity. My hope is that the increased activity is indicating that we have a labor movement more willing to fight, and that there is more rank and file energy behind organizing. And, that's what it's going to take. We need working people getting engaged, getting involved. We need working people uniting across our differences to fight for a common agenda, because we have common interest as working people. So we'll see. But those are some things that are on my mind about that.
That's going to be it for us today, folks. Appreciate your time. Find us online, TVLR.fm. Subscribe to our newsletter. We send you every single week, Last Week in Southern Labor, and Boss Watch, where we take a look at what workers and bosses we're up to in the South every single week. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, all at The Valley Labor Report. TVLR.fm/donate if you'd like to support the program. Reach out to us, TVLR.fm/contact if you have any union news, or if you would like to sponsor the program.
Or if you just have questions, right? We have people who reach out to us who are union curious. And we love that. That always warms our heart. Sometimes we have young folks who reach out to us for a little guidance, right? And that warms our heart as well. So feel free to reach out. I wanted to plug a couple of things real quick as we head out, just to remind folks about the labor notes trainings that are available out there. Remind folks that Indoor Air Care Advocates, they are doing a lot of good work in advocacy. So go to iaqadvocates.org/demand clean air. I think it's a really important issue. It's a workplace safety issue. It's a issue that affects our children. So get involved with them and find out what they're working on in terms of clean air. And the Poor People's Campaign and the Selma Jubilee are both happening the first weekend in March. So there's lots of opportunities. If you are in Alabama, if you want to head to Montgomery or head to Selma, there'll be a lot of folks, a lot of stuff to do there. Really excited about this Southern Workers Assembly virtual discussion that they're hosting called Operation Dixie, Lessons for Southern Workers. They're doing that Thursday, February 29th at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. You can go to southernworker.org to learn more about that. But I have registered. I'm looking forward to that. And Alabama Rise holds its annual legislative day on April 2nd. That's a good opportunity to go to Montgomery and do some citizen lobbying. If you've never visited the State House, if you've never had a conversation with your legislator, that's a good way to get involved and get engaged and learn more about the process and kind of see it up close and personal. And the AFL-CIO is holding its Organizing Institute. Well, they hold those all the time. They're going to have one in Birmingham this April. It's the same week as Labor Notes. So if you're not at Labor Notes, go to the Organizing Institute. All right. Yeah. And if you're in Alabama and you're not really sure, like, how do I get to the Organizing Institute, feel free to hit us up and we'll try to connect you with the right people. But we need people getting trained. We need people getting educated and getting those skills. So definitely want to see some folks turn out for that event. And then that's all I have. I would just say that there's a lot of folks out there doing good work. There's opportunities to get involved. So if you're listening and you're not sure where to turn, there are places and there are people out there and there are groups and coalitions doing good work. And I just encourage you to do what you can. If we all do what we can all get what we need.
All right. See you next week.